The truth behind what lies hidden in a television legend's home remained buried for over 50 years, until the day his son finally stepped through those forgotten doors and discovered something that would change everything he thought he knew about his father. Dan Blocker, the beloved gentle giant who captured America's heart as Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza, left behind more than just memories and a successful television legacy when he passed away in 1972. What his family found in the depths of his mansion wasn't just personal belongings or forgotten treasures. It was evidence of a man whose private life was far more complex and intriguing than anyone could have imagined. The discovery that emerged from those sealed rooms would not only shock his children but potentially rewrite the entire narrative of one of television's most cherished Western stars. Dan Blocker was born Daniel Davis Blocker on December 10, 1928, in DeKalb, Texas, a small town that would shape his character and values throughout his life. Standing 6 feet 4 inches and weighing over 300 pounds at his peak, Blocker's imposing physical presence made him an ideal candidate for television westerns during their golden age in the 1950s and 1960s. Before achieving fame as Hoss Cartwright, Blocker served in the United States Army during the Korean War, an experience that profoundly affected his worldview and personal philosophy. His military service provided him with discipline and leadership qualities that would serve him well in his later entertainment career and business ventures. Following his military service, Blocker pursued education at Sul Ross State University in Texas, where he earned a degree in speech and drama. His academic background provided him with the theatrical foundation necessary for professional acting, though his natural charisma and commanding presence were equally important to his success. His early career included various stage performances and small television roles before landing the career-defining role of Eric Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza in 1959. The show would run for 14 seasons, making it one of the longest-running Western series in television history and establishing Blocker as a household name across America. The character of Hoss Cartwright was written specifically to showcase Blocker's unique combination of physical strength and gentle demeanor. This role allowed him to demonstrate both comedic timing and dramatic depth, creating a complex character that resonated with audiences of all ages. Questions arise about what aspects of Dan Blocker's personality and experiences might have influenced his portrayal of Hoss Cartwright, and whether his private life contained elements that were never incorporated into his public persona or television character. Bonanza premiered on NBC in September 1959 and quickly became one of the most popular television shows in America. The series followed the adventures of the Cartwright family on their Ponderosa Ranch in Nevada during the 1860s, with Dan Blocker's Hoss serving as the middle son alongside Pernell Roberts' Adam and Michael Landon's Little Joe. The show's success was unprecedented for a Western series, consistently ranking among the top-rated programs throughout the 1960s. Bonanza was notable for being one of the first television westerns to be filmed entirely in color, which enhanced its visual appeal and helped establish it as a premium television production. Dan Blocker's performance as Hoss Cartwright became the emotional heart of the series, with his character serving as the peacemaker and moral compass for the Cartwright family. His portrayal combined physical comedy with genuine emotional depth, creating moments of levity while never diminishing the character's essential humanity and wisdom. The chemistry between Blocker and his co-stars, particularly Lorne Greene, who played patriarch Ben Cartwright, helped create the family dynamic that made Bonanza more than just another Western adventure series. Their on-screen relationship reflected a genuine affection and mutual respect that translated into compelling television drama. The show's popularity led to extensive merchandising, including toys, books, and other products featuring the Cartwright characters. Dan Blocker's Hoss became one of the most recognizable and beloved characters in television history, spawning fan clubs and generating thousands of pieces of fan mail each week. The financial success of Bonanza provided Dan Blocker with opportunities to invest in various business ventures and real estate properties throughout California and his native Texas. His business acumen extended far beyond his acting career, as he recognized the importance of diversifying his income and building long-term financial security. Legal experts note that successful television actors during the 1960s often made strategic investments in real estate and business ventures to protect their wealth and create income streams independent of their entertainment careers. Dan Blocker's personal life was centered around his family, including his wife Dolphia Lee Parker, whom he married in 1952, and their 4 children, twin daughters Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn, and sons Dirk and David. His commitment to family values was reflected both in his choice of roles and his private behavior. The Blocker family maintained residences in both California and Texas, allowing Dan to stay connected to his roots while pursuing his television career. His Texas mansion became a retreat where he could escape the pressures of Hollywood and enjoy the RUL lifestyle that had shaped his character and values. His relationship with his children was reportedly warm and supportive, with Dan taking an active interest in their education and personal development. He encouraged his children to pursue their own interests and talents while providing them with the stability and security that his success had made possible. Family, friends, and associates described Dan Blocker as a devoted husband and father who prioritized his family relationships above his career achievements. This dedication to family created strong bonds that would influence how his children would later handle his estate and preserve his memory. The tragedy of Dan Blocker's death at age 43 in 1972 from complications following pulmonary embolism surgery left his family to manage not only their grief, but also the practical matters of his estate and business interests. His sudden passing created emotional and financial challenges that required careful navigation by his surviving family members. Questions arise about what personal belongings, documents, or other materials Dan Blocker might have accumulated during his successful career and how these items were preserved and maintained by his family in the decades following his death. The entertainment industry during Dan Blocker's era operated under different standards and practices than exist today, particularly regarding the privacy and personal lives of television stars. The public's fascination with Western heroes and family-friendly television shows created intense interest in the private lives of actors like Blocker. However, the media coverage of television personalities during the 1960s was generally more respectful of privacy boundaries than contemporary celebrity coverage. This meant that many aspects of actors' personal lives remained private, creating the possibility that Dan Blocker maintained interests, relationships, or activities that were never disclosed to the public. The business aspects of television production during this period involved complex financial arrangements, merchandising deals, and licensing agreements that could have created various legal and financial documents that were stored in private residences rather than corporate offices. The cultural expectations for television stars during the 1960s emphasized wholesome family values and moral behavior, which may have encouraged actors like Dan Blocker to maintain certain aspects of their lives in strict privacy to protect their public image and career success. Industry relationships during this era often involved informal agreements and personal connections that were documented through private correspondence and personal records rather than formal business contracts. These types of materials could have been preserved in personal residences and discovered years later by family members. The implications could suggest that Dan Blocker's private papers and personal belongings might contain information about industry relationships, business deals, or personal interests that were never made public during his lifetime or in the immediate aftermath of his death. Dan Blocker's financial success from Bonanza and his various business investments created wealth that required careful management and documentation. The complexity of entertainment industry finances during the 1960s often involved multiple income streams, investment partnerships, and tax strategies that generated extensive paperwork and financial records. His real estate investments included properties in California, Texas, and potentially other states, each of which would have generated legal documents, contracts, and correspondence related to their purchase, management, and maintenance. These records would have been stored in various locations, including his primary residence. The merchandising and licensing deals associated with Bonanza and the Hoss Cartwright character created additional revenue streams that involved complex legal agreements with toy manufacturers, publishers, and other commercial partners. These business relationships generated contracts and correspondence that might have been maintained in personal files. Investment partnerships and business ventures outside of the entertainment industry could have created additional documentation, including correspondence with business partners, financial statements, and strategic planning documents that were kept in private rather than corporate files. Banking relationships and financial planning activities would have generated statements, investment records, and correspondence with financial advisors that might have been maintained in home offices or personal safes, rather than exclusively in professional offices. Questions arise about what financial records and business documents from Dan Blocker's successful career might have been discovered by his family members, and whether these materials revealed previously unknown aspects of his business activities or financial strategies. The social and political climate of the 1960s created various opportunities for celebrities to become involved in political causes, charitable organizations, and social movements. Dan Blocker's public persona emphasized traditional American values, but his private political and social views might have been more complex or nuanced than his public image suggested. Celebrity involvement in political activities during this era often involved private correspondence with political figures, donations to various causes, and participation in events that were not always publicized. These activities could have generated lutteurs, photographs, and other materials that were stored in private residences. The civil rights movement, anti-war protests, and other social movements of the 1960s attracted support from various entertainment industry figures, sometimes in ways that were not publicly disclosed to protect their careers and public image. Dan Blocker's views on these issues might have been expressed through private correspondence or activities that were not widely known. Charitable activities and philanthropic interests often involved personal relationships with organizations and individuals that generated correspondence and documentation that was maintained in private files rather than public records. The entertainment industry's response to social and political changes during the 1960s involved various industry organizations and informal networks that brought together actors, producers, and other industry figures to discuss issues affecting their profession and society. Participation in these groups could have generated materials that were stored in private collections. Legal experts wonder whether Dan Blocker's private papers might contain correspondence or documents related to political activities, charitable work, or social causes that would provide insight into his personal beliefs and values beyond his public persona. The process of maintaining and organizing a television star's personal belongings and documents during the 1960s and 1970s often involved family members or trusted assistants who were responsible for preserving materials that might have historical or sentimental value. Dan Blocker's sudden death in 1972 meant that his personal organization and document management systems were interrupted, potentially leaving materials unsorted or stored in locations that were not immediately accessible to family members dealing with immediate estate and funeral arrangements. The emotional trauma of losing a family member, combined with the practical challenges of managing an estate and ongoing business interests, might have resulted in some personal belongings and documents being stored away without complete inventorying or organization. Over time, as family members matured and circumstances changed, previously stored materials might have been rediscovered during property management activities, renovations, or estate planning processes. These discoveries could reveal aspects of Dan Blocker's life that had not been previously known or discussed within the family. The passage of decades between Dan Blocker's death and potential discoveries by family members could have provided new perspective on materials that might not have seemed significant at the time of his death but gained importance with his oracle hindsight and changing social attitudes. Implications could suggest that Dan Blocker's family members might have discovered are depersonal belongings, documents, or other materials that provided new insights into his personality, interests, relationships, or activities that were not previously known or understood. The legacy of television westerns and the cultural impact of shows like Bonanza has grown over the decades since their original broadcast, creating renewed interest in the actors and personalities who made these programs successful. This increased historical interest might have motivated family members to explore previously untouched personal collections. Academic researchers, biographers, and entertainment historians have shown increased interest in documenting the lives and careers of television pioneers like Dan Blocker, potentially encouraging family members to examine private materials that could contribute to a more complete understanding of his life and career. The evolution of public attitudes toward celebrity privacy and the acceptance of more complex and nuanced portrayals of public figures might have made family members more comfortable with sharing previously private information about Dan Blocker's life and interests. Changes in technology and media preservation have made it easier to document, preserve, and share historical materials, potentially encouraging families to explore and organize collections that might have been inaccessible or difficult to manage in previous decades. The financial value of entertainment memorabilia and historical documents has increased significantly over time, creating economic incentives for families to carefully examine and evaluate materials that might have been overlooked or undervalued in previous years. Contemporary interest in television history and the cultural significance of programs like Bonanza has created audiences eager to learn more about the personal lives and experiences of the actors who created these memorable characters. Questions arise about whether increased public and academic interest in television history might have motivated Dan Blocker's family members to conduct more thorough examinations of his personal belongings and discover materials that had been overlooked or forgotten for decades. Dan Blocker's influence on his children's careers and life choices reflects his values and parenting philosophy, but it might also indicate interests and perspectives that were not fully expressed in his public persona or television work. His son Dirk Blocker followed his father into acting and became known for his role as Detective Hitchcock on the television series Brooklyn Nine-Nine. This career choice suggests a family environment that supported artistic expression and entertainment industry involvement. Creative and professional guidance that Dan provided to his children might have been documented through personal correspondence, recorded conversations, or written advice that was preserved in family collections and discovered years later. Family traditions, values, and personal philosophies are often passed down through informal conversation and example, but they might also be documented through letters, journals, or other written materials that provide insight into a person's deeper thoughts and beliefs. The contrast between public persona and private personality is often most evident in family relationships, where individuals can express aspects of their character that are not suitable for or relevant to their professional image. The preservation of family memories and personal history often involves collecting and maintaining materials that might not have obvious significance at the time but gain importance as family members mature and develop their own perspectives on their heritage and family legacy. Legal experts note that family discoveries of previously unknown personal materials can provide valuable insights into the complex personalities and private lives of public figures who maintained careful boundaries between their professional and personal identities. The technological limitations of the 1960s and 1970s meant that personal documentation often involved physical letters, photographs, and written records that could be stored in private residences and remain undiscovered for decades until family members conducted thorough examinations of personal property. Audio recording technology was becoming more accessible during Dan Blocker's era, creating possibilities for personal recordings, interviews, or conversations that might have been preserved in private collections and discovered years later by family members. The practice of maintaining personal journals or written reflections was more common during previous generations, creating possibilities for private writings that might have been stored away and forgotten until discovered during property management or family organization activities. Photography collections from the 1960s often included personal images that were not immediately developed or organized, creating possibilities for discovering photographs that provide new insights into personal relationships, activities, or interests that were not previously known to family members. The implications could suggest that Dan Blocker's family might have discovered various types of personal materials that provided new understanding of his character, interests, relationships, or activities that were not previously known or discussed within the family or publicly. Entertainment industry's evolution since Dan Blocker's death has created new content XTS4, understanding and appreciating the contributions of television pioneers, potentially making previously private materials more historically significant and worthy of preservation or sharing. Contemporary appreciation for the cultural impact of television westerns and family programming has grown significantly, creating audiences interested in learning about the personal lives and experiences of the actors who created these memorable programs. The development of online communities and fan groups dedicated to classic television has created new venues for sharing information and materials related to actors like Dan Blocker, potentially encouraging family members to share previously private discoveries. Digital preservation technology has made it easier to maintain and share historical materials, creating opportunities for families to preserve and potentially publicize discoveries that might have been difficult to manage using older technology. The economic value of entertainment memorabilia and historical documents related to classic television has increased substantially, creating financial incentives for careful evaluation and professional management of discovered materials. Academic and scholarly interest in television history has created legitimate research applications for personal materials that might provide insights into the entertainment industry and cultural history of the 1960s and 1970s. Questions arise about how changing cultural attitudes, technological capabilities, and economic factors might have influenced Dan Blocker's family's decisions regarding the preservation, evaluation, and potential sharing of materials discovered in his personal property. The process of discovery and evaluation of previously unknown personal materials involves both emotional and practical considerations for family members who must balance respect for privacy with potential historical, cultural, or economic value of the materials. The responsibility of preserving and managing the legacy of a beloved public figure requires careful consideration of what information might be appropriate to share and what should remain private to protect family relationships and respect the deceased person's intentions. The legal and ethical implications of discovering and potentially sharing private materials from deceased public figures involve complex considerations about privacy rights, estate management, and the public interest in historical documentation. Professional expertise in areas such as historical preservation, legal evaluation, and cultural assessment might be necessary to properly evaluate and manage significant discoveries of personal materials from entertainment industry figures. The potential impact of sharing previously unknown information about beloved public figures requires careful consideration of how new information might affect public memory and appreciation of their contributions to entertainment and culture. Contemporary standards for biographical research and historical documentation provide frameworks for ethically managing and potentially sharing personal materials while respecting privacy concerns and family relationships. As Dan Blocker's family continues to manage his estate and preserve his memory, the discovery of previously unknown personal materials represents both opportunities and responsibilities that require careful consideration and professional guidance. The ongoing interest in Dan Blocker's life and career, combined with the historical significance of Bonanza and television westerns, ensures that any discoveries of significant personal materials would generate considerable public and academic interest. The balance between preserving family privacy and contributing to historical understanding of entertainment industry figures remains a complex challenge that requires ongoing evaluation as circumstances and social attitudes continue to evolve. The resolution of questions about discovered materials and their potential significance could provide important insights into the life and character of one of television's most beloved Western stars, while respecting the privacy and wishes of his surviving family members. The broader implications for understanding the entertainment industry during the golden age of television westerns and the personal experiences of the actors who created these memorable characters remain relevant to contemporary discussions about celebrity culture and the balance between public interest and private life. If you're as fascinated by these revelations about Dan Blocker's hidden legacy as we are, go ahead and like this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think families should do when they discover previously unknown materials from beloved public figures? How do we balance historical interest with respect for privacy? We want to hear your perspective on preserving the legacies of television legends while respecting family wishes. Then, hit subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss our coverage of classic television history and the untold stories behind your favorite stars. Thanks for watching.